Welcome back to episode 3 of the Stuck in My Room podcast. Today I have guest Tristan Risk. How are you?
I am well and also stuck in my room.
How have you been passing the time in quarantine?
I feel like I am unfairly adapted to this better than most. I have been luckily spending lots of time working on making little sculptures and having Zoom meetings about 2 film projects that are on the horizon and potty training a bearded dragon. So my partner's been doing a hydroponic garden. So I feel like, it's one of those things where for some reason I've just kicked into this high productivity mode. But I also go into these weird little like slumps where I just like watch YouTube videos for a day and then I'll like really like kick it into high gear again. It's been this weird little roller coaster of just trying to find a happy medium. How have you been holding up in captivity thus far?
I've been keeping busy. This has kept me pretty busy. So when I'm not doing something else, I'm pretty much just working on this. I've been reading Lloyd Kaufman's Direct Your Own Damn Movie.
An excellent book.
Yes, it's very entertaining, very entertaining. Writing music, writing short stories for upcoming projects I'd like to be working on. Other than that, not too much. Just trying not to go crazy.
Yeah, you explored the same 4 walls a number of times. But it's been good for a lot of things in terms of, I'm lucky. I have been in quarantine with my pets and my partner. And my partner and I toured one summer with our sword swallower, a snake, and a bunch of carnies in our old bus. So we're really good at being in close quarters with each other, where I think a lot of other people like are used to spending quite a lot of time apart. And as a result of that, we've been getting along really well. Not to be like smuggy smuggerson about it or anything like that, but it's been kind of like, oh, it's a little vacation. We're going to get all creative and we're going to work on our art. And, I know that that's not the reality for everybody. I am very well aware of my privilege in the fact that I am able to stay home. I'm not a frontline worker. I'm not a care person. I'm not health services. I am not sick. I have my health. I don't have kids who need homeschooling. So I recognize that I'm super in a really good position right now, which is why I'm like, all things considered, I'm kind of making out like a bandit right now.
You are very multi-talented. You have a lot of things going on. Let's start with the acting side of things.
Yes, let's start with that.
Okay. What was your first exposure to horror? Was there like a film that really opened your eyes and made you go, wow, this is something special?
Oh man. I remember being super into Michael Jackson's Thriller at a really young age. I was born in 1980, so I was like just young enough that it was like, what is that? I'm like horrified and yet intrigued by it. And of course, my mom was like a fitness instructor at the time, so I had like Top 40 being played around me quite a bit. And Thriller was one of those tracks. And before we got into like how odd Michael Jackson's life would have been later, at that point I was just like, oh, there's like monsters and stuff, but they're like dancing. So something in my brain at that point twigged. And then there was another point where I was at a sleepover and they were watching Child's Play. And I was like, this is like scary, but scary in kind of like boost, like jump out and scare you is scary. Like it wasn't like I don't know, maybe I just was expecting more of an existential horror ghost story and it was just Chucky, so I was just kind of like, oh, so this, huh? Okay.
Yeah, I started with Pet Cemetery. I probably started with it way too young though. I was like 9, and
Right.
my dad took me to Rogers Video when that still existed, and he's like,
I
okay,
miss
pick out
Rogers.
what you want. So like for some reason that cover it drew me in, so I ended up picking that, and my love for horror was kind of like
How old did you say you were?
about 9.
About 9. Okay, so I'm trying to picture you at 9. and you're in the horror section, and like you've got all these titles around, and there's just like you kind of are like, that one, I like pets. And cemetery, it'll be spooky. And then, yeah, the Wizard of Oz was never the same after that. Can I ask you something about Pet Cemetery though?
Sure.
Have you've seen the old school film, and have you read the book?
I have not read the book.
You have not read the book?
I have not
Would you
read the
be
book.
interested in reading the book though?
Of course.
Okay, I have to say, like, of all of Stephen King's books, there's two of his that stand alone as my favorites, and one of those two is Pet Cemetery because, um, I mean, I really like Stephen King, but I'm just gonna go out there and say I recognize a Coke rant when I read one, and there's just a couple of really beautiful moments there where, I mean, like, that took me back to, like, a couple of parties I might have been at in the late 2000s, so I'm like, hmm. Well done, well played, sir. But I mean, it is a really, really interesting story, and it adds a lot more to it than just the movie. But if, as long, provided the film didn't, like scar you when you saw it too horribly.
No, no, no. It kind of became a tradition at that point, and it would always be every weekend we'd go pick out a horror movie, and then, it's kind
That's
of
awesome.
went from there. And I'm 21 now, so yeah.
Cool. And you know what's really neat about that? And there's so many people who have a really big love for horror and genre film who had that experience of going to the video store. I mean, that was my childhood and my teen years too, was like going to Video Stop in Tawasin, and like, they had 5 movies for days for $5, and you're like, oh man, what am I gonna load up with? And I always had like a closet romantic me being like, I'm gonna go and hang out in the horror movie section, and I'm gonna find another person, and they're just gonna look at me, and I'm gonna look at them, and we'll like see what each other's choosing, and they're gonna be like cryptozoology, and we'll just have a moment, and it'll be so magical. But that's not how any of it ever worked for me ever in life. But I had this idea that I'm like, yeah, that's how it's gonna happen. Never once. But I'm like, maybe it happened for other people that way. I don't know.
All right. When did you discover your passion for acting?
I was always into acting and performing, being on stage from a younger age. I did musical theater growing up, but I didn't get into film too much until after 2010, and that was with the sauce, because like I'd done some music videos, and I hadn't really broken into anything in Vancouver. My main focus had been like doing like burlesque and sideshow and cabaret, so I didn't really put any oomph into it, other than just being like the showgirl or like background on the L Word or something. And it wasn't until American Mary when I got a chance to actually like act, and that was such a huge combination of like timing, people, connection, fluke. It was so many elements that just came together. Like, I never should have gotten that job. I totally got that job. I am really lucky, and it's still one of like the best characters I've ever done.
No, it's a personal favorite of mine. It's probably one of the best body horror films of recent years.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's one of those ones that I feel like you can go back and watch anytime, and it's still, you're just like, yeah, it's a good movie. It's like a good movie to watch, and you're excited to introduce it to somebody who's never seen it before. You're always like, oh, I got one for you.
Speaking of the Soska twins, you've worked with many talented directors over the years. To name a few, Gigi from Luchagore and James Bickert. What have your experiences been like on set?
I'm going to say I'm lucky. I've had mostly positive experiences on set. Not everything has been positive all the time. There was like one project that almost broke me, where I was like, I never want to do this ever again. But it wasn't so bad that I couldn't come away with it after like spending some kind of time away from being on set for a little while. Then I'm like, okay, I can come back to this now. But I think that of all the projects I've worked on, I've been super lucky that I've had a really good connection, or at least I felt like I've had a really good connection to the people I was working with. So that's a big component. I know not everybody gets that, and I know some people will be like, "Oh, it's just a job," and just kind of treat it like really professionally. But I try to like get along and get along well with the people that we come together and do a movie with, particularly with like the stuff that's like a smaller scale and lower budget, just because nobody's getting paid the big bucks. You're there because you want to do it, and so because you want to do it, everybody else there wants to do it, and so you want to make it happen. You want it to be a success. So I think that there's a little bit more of that camaraderie in the smaller budget things. And yeah, I'm very lucky that I think fondly or well of, I would say, like 85% at least of the people I've worked with, and that's probably better than average, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any memorable on-set stories you can share? Some that really stick out to you?
I've got so many fun stories. I'm just kind of thinking. Okay, I'll relate one from Rapid because it's actually really it just kind of shows how lovely a person he is. So, Phil, CM Punk plays Billy in the Rapid remake that the Soska sisters directed, and I just kind of know him from wrestling. I've never met him prior to this. I was just on set while he was doing his work, and there's one scene where he's just playing just obnoxious asshole, just the kind of guy that you're like, oh man,
you kind of want him to die.
Yeah, you're like, I hope the monster eats you first, kind of thing. Like, he's just like, but he's got this scene where he's walking down the street and he's like followed this chick and he's catcalling her, and immediately like you're just like, ugh. And like she's walking on the other side of the street looking at her phone, like doing that thing a lot of women, I've done myself, you're like, please go away and stop yelling at me. And he's like yelling, yeah, baby, you're not even a New Jersey 6. And every time cut was yelled, he'd like go and be like, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I just want you to know, like, I'm just trying to yell like really nasty things, but just I don't. And she's like, I know, because it's an acting scene and you're not a piece of garbage. It's okay. But it was just I thought it spoke volumes that he was just like super concerned about the mindset, and he didn't want to put anybody off.
Do you have any on-set stories from American Mary that you can share? I know you had to work under quite the prosthetic makeup in that film. What was that like?
I really liked working with prosthetics. That was the first time I had ever done like full facial prosthetics before. But I've done body painting before, airbrushing and what have you. And I have learned the hard way that when your body painter asks you, so how much time do you have? You never, ever, ever, ever say, oh, I've got my whole day open, because they're like, so you stand there for 8 hours being airbrushed. So Beatrice's makeup took 2 hours to put on with 2 makeup artists. Lori and Amelia from Masters Effects were working with me, and yeah, I have to say, like, after standing like this, like getting airbrushed and like not being allowed to sit down and having things glued to you, I was like, oh, I can do this standing on my head. This is super easy. The only thing about that was, because I'd never had that before, I wasn't used to seeing someone else's face on my face, which was super disconcerting to catch like glimpses of my reflection or see myself in the mirror and like be looking and it's not my face, and it's just like, oh yeah, no, that's me, that's what I look like. Or else have people say, oh, I thought, because this was filmed in Vancouver and I know quite a number of people in Vancouver, and when they're like, oh, we see Tristan's on set, where's Tristan? And someone would point out where I was, and they're like, oh, she's the oh, we thought they had just found this woman who had like this surgery. And I was like, wow. I kind of wish that that person exists because that's very specific. But yeah, I was really excited to kind of like be able to just sort of like merge into Beatrice because of that makeup. It made it really easy.
That's awesome. And what was it like working with Catherine Isabel, who
It was
most people
cool.
would know from Gingersnaps?
Yeah, actually, funny story about that. So, a million years ago when Gingersnaps first came out, I saw it in the theaters. And I saw it in the theaters with my boyfriend of the time. And I remember watching that movie and really being into it because there was just like no female werewolf movies that I had seen at that point. And it was just kind of, I was a little bit older, but not by much. So, of course, it really resonated with me. It was just kind of like a good kind of, we have the craft for the witches and the ginger snaps for the werewolves. And it's like, yeah, fuck yeah. Um, and I had remarked to my boyfriend of the time, oh, I would really like to do something like that. And he looked at me, and I'll never forget, he looked me dead in the eye and he said, you'll never be able to do anything like that. So this is just like a lesson to everybody. Don't ever use that as some kind of curse because it's almost guarantees that you will ensure the success of the person you're trying to curse in like just because the nature of the universe or what have you. Because I found that it to be ironic that the first feature film that I ever work on was with Catherine Isabel after having been told that and having my dreams just kind of like crushed like a bug for a moment and having that little piece like die for a long time.
So not only do you act in films, but you also write and direct them. You have worked
Mm-hmm.
on short films such as Parlor Tricks, which I was lucky to catch at Badass Film Festival last year,
Thank
which I very
you.
much enjoyed. And your most recent one, it was Reptile House, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about your experiences with the writing and the directing and, what kind of made you gravitate towards directing?
What happened with directing was originally I had written Parlor Tricks and I had written it with the cast members in mind. So, luckily for me, when I wrote that, everybody I based the characters off of said yes. So, that made it that much better because I could visualize each of them. And then, because they all said yes, I had tried to get my friend Topher, who was my AD, to direct it for me because he worked with Ariel Hansen from Bad Cookie Pictures and they had been working closely together. And I was really trying to be like, no, Topher, like you direct it. And he's like, I really think you should direct it. I'm like, no, I picked everything out. I've got like a location and everything. And he's like, I really just think you should direct this because you're already kind of directing it. And I was like, but I haven't been to film school. I don't know how lenses work. I don't know what lenses to choose. And he's like, well, you can let the DOP do that and let them do something and they can choose the lenses. And then I said, okay. I really suffer from imposter syndrome. So, not being someone who's been to film school, I felt like I had no right to kind of just sort of jump on. I was really worried about being looking like I was just jumping on the female director bandwagon. But that being said, like I've directed like live shows before, so I don't know why I thought this was off limits to me.
Hmm.
But at the same time, like I get a lot of joy out of getting these people together and inserting a crazy idea in a bunch of people's heads. And there's some things where I'm like, okay, like I really want to do this. I don't personally want to be in this. But I want to see it happen, which is what the thing was with Parlor Tricks. Was it wasn't so much that it was like a vehicle for my to put myself in front of the camera. I just wanted to see this like weird little idea formulate, and then when it happened, I was like, haha, that was fun. I want to do it again. And with Parlor Tricks, it was just kind of like sort of a funny idea in my head, whereas Reptile House was a direct answer to a whole bunch of questions I get asked very regularly, being reptile keeper.
Not only do you direct and write, you also perform in a sideshow group, which you had mentioned earlier, called
Mm-hmm.
Caravan of Curiosities.
Indeed.
All right, how did that all come about, and what got you into the whole sideshow end of things?
Well, I had been doing burlesque since 2001, which is amazing because I'm still 21, right? Haha. Um, but I had been doing it and touring quite extensively, and I had started to get bored with just striptease. And I had not been practicing consistently or regularly enough to do anything that would be passable for circus, because that all requires like many hours to be any kind of good in any professional capacity. So I went to the bastard sibling of circus, which was sideshow. Now, that being said, there's a lot of things in sideshow that do come with technique. But a lot of it is just stunt application and just willingness to do it. For instance, something that takes skill, I would say, is like our whip tricks, where I'll hold a rose either in my hand or in my teeth, and then my partner will crack the whip and take the head off the end of the rose. That takes not only skill, that does take trust. Where something like walking in broken glass is considered fairly par for the course in sideshow. But when I do it, I'm doing like the drop splits into it, or, a back bend or something like that. So I try to bring something interesting to it. But there is so much crazy ideas within sideshow that I would like to take the classics and just like try to present them in a really beautiful light. That being said, the Caravan of Curiosities came out of a collective of people who originally it was a core group, and now it's just like a smaller pod from that original group. And it has a Canada-wide network of artists that are all part of the collective. So it's never just like the same people involved, and it allows us to promote other artists' work as well, because there's a lot of people we know who do things that we don't necessarily do, but I'm like, oh, this is an amazing magician, or oh, you want one mermaid, you want two mermaids, you want three mermaids that are all trained underwater stunt performers. Yes, we've got that. We've got fire performers. We have safety insurance, because safety first.
Yeah, and speaking of safety, now with the amount of stunts that go through that whole show, have you ever had any form of incidents where there's been an accident or?
I know I know more sideshow horror stories from other people, and those are their stories, and I won't disclose them because some of them are pretty horrific. But I would say that probably the hardest thing is probably Burns's story, where someone had given him the wrong fuel, and he went to breathe fire, and it had burned the end of his nose really badly. But he said that was like when he was in his late teens, early 20s, and just learning, and you learn fast not to do that. And it's taken him a lot to kind of get the cred for being a safe performer. And that's something that you have to work really hard with, especially when you work with fire, is you just have your reputation of being like safety and safety aware. And there's a lot of people who aren't always thinking that. They're just thinking, ooh, fire, flashy. And I am also one of those people, but I am also one of those people that don't want to like, be that person that's the cautionary tale too, right? That's a main concern. It's the same thing with the reptiles. It's like, we work with the reptiles, we handle them a lot, but we always are very cognizant that we don't want to be the cautionary tale. Nobody wants to be like the Tiger King or anything like that, of, oh yeah, that person who got their arm ripped off.
Fair enough, fair enough. And with the reptiles now, not too long ago, you guys started a snake yoga class. Now,
Yeah.
what inspired you to do that?
Someone sent us a meme of snake yoga and said, you should do this. And I said, ha ha. And then we got a message that said, are you doing this? And I said, maybe. And then it just turned into this weird thing that just took off on its own. And we actually were holding regular snake yoga classes up until, we went into COVID. And there was always, one or two people in the classes. We learned kind of after our first class just sort of how to tweak it. And it's been a really enjoyable experience to be able to do that with people. We get bachelorette parties who want to do something unusual for the stagette coming in to do a snake yoga class. We get birthday parties. And it's nice because it's just our snake, so it's never too many snakes. We have handlers in the room, so they're there to make adjustments the way a yoga teacher would make an adjustment on the students. And it's really exciting to see people being excited about being able to combine the two together and do it in a respectful way. A lot of the animal yoga is just an excuse to interact with the animals, and this is probably the most intimate animal human interaction you get of kind of all of those animal yoga ideas.
Mm-hmm. I have one more question for you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Do you have anything in the works that you'd like to talk about that we haven't really gone over yet?
Well, since you asked, I actually do have two things in the works. The first thing that I'm excited to tell you about is I am going to be starring in a film that is written by Dana Hammer and Rhiannon Ames, and it is going to be directed by Calamity Kate. And I don't know if you know who Calamity Kate is, but if you don't know, you should know because she's amazing. She is a wrestler, a director, a burlesque dancer. She and I toured across North America and Europe together as burlesque dancers in December 2010. And we also wrote a short film and she directed it and I starred in it. So we have this feature film that is about a woman whose vagina turns tampons into vampire bats. And it is called Red Wings. And I'm very excited about the future of vagina bats. So that is the first project that I am excited about. And if you thought vagina bats wasn't cool enough, well, hold on to your hats and glasses. Because the next film I'm working on is a film that I am not only going to be able to be co-starring in with a very talented group of human beings, but I'm also going to be co-directing, and it is called Stripcraft, and it is about a coven of stripper witches that is a grindhouse feature film. So that's going to be my first feature that I am going to be directing. So that is pretty cool. And it is about witches who are using being strippers as a front for their chaos magic. It's kind of amazing. I'm pretty excited about both of these projects. So hopefully we're able to do these this year, but we are also aware of what the current global situation is.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't happen right away, we're just doing all of our prep at this point to ensure that when it is safe and we are able to keep everybody safe on set and healthy, then we'll look at doing these projects. But yeah, safety and health first. Got to take care of everybody, and I don't need the guilt of anybody's death on my hands because I made them go to work.
No, that's totally understandable, and I look forward to checking them out when they come out. I heard about Red Wings before this, actually. I think
right. You probably would have heard about it at Badass because it both Red Wings and Stripcraft won won prizes in the script competition at Badass 2 years ago.
That's all I got for you. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or?
Maybe that people can check out. I've got some YouTube channels for them. They can check out Burns the Dragon if they want to find out more about my partner's sideshow performances or extreme body modifications. He's going to be interviewing some really interesting people in the world of extreme body modification. And they can check out my channel, which is Little Miss Risk. There's going to be some vlogs coming up about interesting and weird history about Vancouver. And also our Caravan of Curiosities YouTube, which has a lot of our circus and sideshow acts and performances and just general weirdness if anybody is at all interested. So yeah, that's the only thing I can really keep plugging here. Other than that, just hoping everybody stays safe and manages to weather this storm together.